We would all like to say that we aren't greedy, right? Like, no one's gonna flaunt around the fact that they're greedy, and if they're gonna admit it, it isn't gonna be with joy. I mean, I'm not greedy. All I need in life is a Popeyes 3-piece meal, maybe a fuzzy blanket, a remaster of Fallout New Vegas, probably need a gaming PC set up to play it. While we're at it, a high-rise condo would be nice. Maybe a yacht full of strippers? Okay, maybe I need to amend my previous statement. What does it even mean to be greedy though? If you take from someone else, then that's relatively more problematic than making something for yourself, right? Like if I steal my friend's slice of pizza, that's different than if I could magically conjure up another slice out of thin air, right? So is it greed in the first instance, but not the second? Or is greed just simply the accumulation of too much stuff, regardless of the means we use to get that stuff? Let's think of some examples. Jeff Bezos and a common thief. Not getting too into economic philosophy and theory, but Jeff Bezos doesn't acquire money by theft, but rather, your ass wanted some stuff you didn't need on Amazon and you bought it. The thief, on the other hand, just takes regardless of any consent on your part. But even though we recognize the different means here, I would imagine many of us would consider Bezos relatively more greedy than the thief, especially if the thief is stealing just to cover his bare necessities. Regardless of what greed is, we're pretty sure it's a bad thing though, right? Like in movies and TV shows, the villains are usually being greedy after something. But are there more unique considerations to be had about greed? Well, for that, we're going to be looking at an essay by our jolly old friend David Hume. Welcome back to Philosophy Tunes, the channel that's apparently being shown in schools? Let's see if they'll show this one in school after I say fuck. Today we're talking about greed. And to help us out, we're taking a look at Hume's essay on avarice. And avarice pretty much means greed. Am I the only one that didn't know what avarice meant? Someone else please own up to it so I don't look stupid. To start us out, Hume talks about the extreme power of greed as compared to other passions of ours. None of the most furious excesses of love and ambition are in any respect to be compared to the extremes of avarice. Okay, so when I read this, I immediately thought about crime. Because when someone decides to commit a crime, that's usually an indication that they're extremely motivated by the aim of that crime. And most crimes, I believe, are motivated by money. You got robbery, fraud, murder even. And although love and ambition can sometimes be the motive behind crimes, I think it's safe to say that money is more often the motivator. So maybe the fact that more crimes are committed over money than love or ambition speaks to Hume's point here. Next, Hume wants to speak about the sort of person that is infected with greed. He paints the picture of a greedy person as an older, colder man, pretty much Ebenezer Scrooge. It generally prevails in old men, or in men of cold tempers, where all the other affections are extinct, and the mind being incapable of remaining without some passion or pursuit, at last finds out this monstrously absurd one, which suits the coldness and inactivity of its temper. I think this is a perfect point to get interactive here and ask whether you guys can think of an example of someone who is greedy but also not cold-tempered. Are those two inseparable? My initial objection was going to be those rich people who donate a lot to charity, like Andrew Carnegie for example. But I might be mistaking greed with simply having a lot of money. I guess it goes back to that question as to whether having a lot of money necessarily means that you're greedy. Cause I don't think simply having lots of cash necessarily means you're a cold person. But I do think that being greedy might mean you got a high chance of also being cold. What do you think? Now the next idea here is the most interesting one for me. Hume points out that there are no examples of someone being cured of greed. We find no vice so irreclaimable as avarice. And though there scarcely has been a moralist or philosopher, from the beginning of the world to this day, who has not leveled a stroke at it, we hardly find a single instance of any persons being cured of it. Now there's two branches of inquiry that stem from this passage. First question, can you think of an example of someone being cured of greed? If so, then Hume may not be correct here. But assuming he is correct, then another question emerges. Why bother critiquing greed at all? Let's start with the first question. For me, when I try to think up counterexamples, I only could really think of fictional characters. Ebenezer Scrooge keeps popping up in this video as an example. Side note, I don't really know of a single other person named Ebenezer. I dare someone here to try and use that name on Tinder and see how successful they'll be. I guess a possible real-life counterexample could be Carnegie, since he donated a lot to charity, and he even wrote a book about the responsibility of rich people to be philanthropic. But I could see some people not thinking that example is sufficient. So I turn to you guys, my much smarter audience, to ask for any examples you can think of where a greedy person has been cured of their greed. But assuming Hume is actually right, This might mean that greed is incurable, and yet we are swarmed with morals and pop culture about the evils of greed. But while these messages are correct, what's the point if it's not gonna cure anyone? Like, is a greedy person really gonna watch Toy Story 2 and see the downfall of Al from Al's Toy Barn and have some great epiphany about their greed? Are they immediately gonna donate all their money to charity and live a humble life? Probably not, so what's the point? The point may be preventative. Like, even if we can't cure people of their greed, maybe we could prevent someone from going down a path of greed. Perhaps that's where the utility of anti-greed messaging is. Now, Hume finishes this essay off with a story, but to be honest, his own story is kinda lame. But he does include a much better story written by someone else at the end too. This is from an Antoine de la Motte. I apologize to the entire country of France. The story goes that a greedy man dies and is sent to the river Styx, and the ferryman asks for payment to take him across the river. The greedy man refuses to pay and instead jumps into the river to swim to the other side. The gods, they get pissed at this and decide the most fitting severe punishment is to send the greedy man back to Earth to see how his heirs use his inheritance. To me, this is a reminder that no amount of wealth can save you from death, and eventually all of that you've accumulated will be used up by others. I also thought that you'd best raise your kids well and spend more time with them instead of always chasing the bag, since they'll probably be the ones inheriting that bag in the end. Share your interpretation of the story below. And you know what, since we're at the end of this video, share your thoughts on the ideas expressed below as well. I know we just covered an essay on greed, so this might be a bit of a hypocritical ask, but subscribe to the channel and give me a like. And with that, I wish you all a beautiful rest of your day.